Last week, the town of Collingwood on the southern shores of Georgian Bay released a report from its judicial inquiry into some problematic municipal dealings. It delivered some 306 recommendations, including the creation of a lobbyist registry. Mary Baxter covers the southwestern part of the province for Ontario Hubs. She's with us from London to fill us in on that story. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeyan. It's good to be here.
So, Mary, there's been some intrigue in Collingwood. Former politician Paul Bonwick, who's turned into a lobbyist there, has made the headlines. What happened there?
Well, it happened in the 2010 to 2014 term of council, the municipal council there. And Bonwick was the brother of the then mayor and knew key town officials. And it had to do with a couple of town transactions. One was a 50% sale of a 50% share of the town's electrical utility. The other one had to do with some expansion and improvements to recreational facilities. And in both of those cases, Bonwick, who was a veteran lobbyist, he represented companies that were involved, but not everyone on council knew about this. So when they voted for the companies to actually be awarded these contracts or to be able to buy the electrical utility, there was a good proportion of council that did not know that he, the brother of the mayor, who also advised the mayor, was actually the lobbyist for these companies.
Okay, so you say council didn't know. So how did this all come to light?
So it slowly came to light. There were many questions around both of these transactions, and beyond Bonwick's involvement in them. And eventually, what happened was about 2 years ago, the town council asked for a judicial inquiry. Now, last week, as you mentioned, the findings of the inquiry were handed down, and it detailed a lot of this information. Now, I think it's important to note here that the findings in the inquiry are not of a criminal, or they don't have criminal or civil liability. But they certainly detail a lot of the activities and, as you mentioned, make a lot of recommendations, of which about a tenth of which, 29 recommendations, are to do with the town establishing a lobbyist registry.
I'm curious, our viewers might be wondering, why should they and other ordinary citizens be worried about this?
Well, I think a really good example of the importance of this kind of situation. There's a couple of really good examples. I mean, for the town of Collingwood, the decisions that were made were actually fairly problematic, and they didn't have access to all of the information that they needed to make sound decisions. And there's concern that the town is out not only the $7.1 million that the judicial inquiry cost, but also the more than $1 million that Bonwick earned out of these two transactions. And then on top of that, there's the legacy of these. So, for instance, the improvements to the recreational facilities involved putting fabric structures around them to preserve them. But the challenge was that the structures themselves only last about 15 years, whereas bricks and mortar would have lasted, 50 years. So you've got a big difference right there. They've had other challenges with the way that those projects were handled as well. So there's a lot of concern. But we've also seen it federally with the We Charity case, where we saw the We Charity receive a federal contract to administer, millions of dollars in student funding for the COVID-19 relief effort. But they were again awarded it without, in very confusing instances, when they and they hadn't registered on the Lobbyist Registry, the federal one. When they did, it was revealed that they had more than I think it was 65 communications reports over a period of 6 months, and they approached actually 19 different federal registry or entities. So it's really, really important to have this kind of transparency in dealings with our elected officials. And again, I just want to emphasize what was emphasized to me by many people in this story. The activity of lobbying is not there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of government doing business, but it's when it's not transparent is when the issue arises.
I'm curious, some people may be wondering, what is the role of a lobbyist? Who pays them? What exactly does that look like when we talk about whether it's town council here in Toronto or at the federal level? What is the role of a lobbyist?
Well, typically a lobbyist is someone who might be attached to a company that is asking the government for a favorable decision in terms of their government business, whatever that might be. They can be paid professionals that might represent a business or a whole industry, and so that's what a lobbyist is. A lobbyist registry is where they register all of their activity, and these types of registries are mandatory at both the federal and provincial levels. So that means that all lobbyists that fall under the specific definitions held by the registry have to register with them. But at the municipal level, here in Ontario, their municipalities don't have to have them. And in fact, earlier this year, Collingwood became only the seventh municipality in Ontario to have a lobbyist registry. Now, there is one municipality that must have a lobbyist registry, and that is Toronto.
Why don't the other municipalities have registries set up?
Because they don't have to. There's nothing in provincial legislation that compels them to do this. However, the current mayor of Collingwood, Brian Saunderson, said to me, he feels that municipalities should look very closely at these. One of the challenges is I mean, he says he just look at Collingwood's story and what happened there, and they're looking at now something that is ongoing in terms of town administration, so much money that they've had to spend. It's a challenge for some Ontario municipalities, though, I'm told, because there's concerns about how much it costs. And when you're looking at a municipality, like half of the 444 municipalities in Ontario actually have fewer than 10 staff. And so it becomes, something that is fairly hard for them to administer and pay for.
Mary Baxter, I want to thank you very much. Again, another very important story, this time from the southern shores of Georgian Bay. Thank you so much, Mary Baxter, joining us from London, Ontario.
Thanks, Jeyan.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.